Over 200 years ago, when the United States was established under a new democratic government, it was written that the Supreme Court justices would enjoy their time on the court for as long as they so pleased. This is known as lifetime tenure. My name is Clara Kasich. I'm a student at the University of South Carolina who has spent the past 2 semesters studying the Supreme Court and lifetime tenure for justices, and I'm here to tell you that times have changed. Senator Padilla, who serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee, says it shouldn't be controversial to say that the American people deserve a Supreme Court insulated from politics. But when every confirmation turns into an all-out partisan battle, or when one administration alone can overturn a lifetime of precedent, it's clear the court has lost its way. Public trust in the Supreme Court is at an all-time low, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Let's dive into why that might be. Before we get into how to solve the problem, we have to better understand what the issue is and where those issues come from. The Constitution of the United States says, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office." This is from Article 3, Section 1. Essentially, this means that justices can serve for as long as they'd like to, so long as they behave well. This is a big issue because founders don't actually outline what good behavior is. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has 14 scandals recorded by Forbes magazine, including having his wife attend the January 6th rallies and riots in Washington, D.C., which is treason. But it doesn't even stop there. Forbes magazine says ProPublica first reported Thomas has for years accepted trips from GOP mega donor and developer Harlan Crow, including his private jet and super yacht, without disclosing them on financial disclosures as federal law requires. If we continue to allow behavior like this, how can Americans be expected to trust that our leaders are truly interpreting our Constitution and laws in an accurate way? Impeachment is incredibly difficult because it's the same of what is required from a president, so it's a lengthy process and doesn't even guarantee that a justice will leave. Now let's go back to September 2020. Early voting for an election like no other had already begun when Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away at the age of 87. President Trump and the Republican Party scrambled to fill the spot of the elderly justice, which they ultimately successfully did after only about 3 months before a new president, Joe Biden, took office. Now, let's go back to February 2016. President Barack Obama had just begun his final year of his second term when Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away. But Obama's appointee was refused a position on the court on the grounds that the next presidential election was so close, according to the Republicans in power in Congress. When comparing these situations, you should be able to tell that the High Court of our United States is extremely flawed. In June of 2023, the Brennan Center for Justice published a report outlining the issues with the current court methodology. They state, quote, "Donald Trump appointed 3 justices in 4 years, whereas Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama each appointed 2 justices in 8 years. This wide variation, as well as its impact on the development of American law, is impossible to square with the principles of democratic legitimacy." You might be thinking to yourself, why should I care about this issue? You should care because all the decisions that the Supreme Court makes directly impact you, even though it seems very far removed from your life. Let's consider the topic of abortion. Since Roe v. Wade in 1973, any person who could have a baby could also have access to an abortion, no matter where they lived. In 2021, the Supreme Court overturned this decision, making the freedom of choice not guaranteed in all 50 states. If you or someone you know needed an abortion but now lives in a state where abortion is illegal, there are extreme hoops to jump through in order to make a choice on personal bodily autonomy. We can fix this issue with 18-year term limits for Supreme Court justices. This would reduce polarization, lead to more experienced judges, and guarantee 2 appointments for each presidency. An 18-year term limit would reduce polarization in the Supreme Court because term limits that span a course of a defined 18 years, justices will continue to be in touch with the public because of the regular turnover that would also take place. Director of the Constitution Project at POGO, Sarah Turberville, says, "A single 18-year limit is a reasonable and necessary step to address this central problem with an unaccountable court. This legislation could also help reduce the incentive to play politics with the court by ending the unpredictable and lengthy terms justices presently enjoy." Remember that story about Donald Trump and Republicans accepting a new Supreme Court justice when a new election cycle had already begun? Court packing like this would no longer be an issue, as it would be clear that he'd have 2 appointments in his time as president. There would be lower stakes in general with each appointment. A set 18 years would ensure that justices appointed were the most educated and experienced as they possibly could be. Tom Ginsburg of the University of Chicago School of Law says, "In the recognition model, judges are selected relatively late in life in recognition of significant achievements as a lawyer, prosecutor, or academic. The individual achievements of the candidate are paramount for selection, and individuation continues on the bench." In 1993, President Bill Clinton appointed Ruth Bader Ginsburg and received backlash from many Democrats in Congress because of her age, which was 60 at the time. Ginsburg had an extensive and impressive resume, and she was more than qualified for her position. She served on the court for 27 years and died whilst on the court. Now, Justice Thomas was appointed at the age of 43 in 1991. He had only been practicing law for 17 years before he took on his current role, and he is now going on his 34th year serving as a Supreme Court justice. When each president is guaranteed 2 appointments and each appointment lasts 18 years, justices will still be able to make a long and lasting impact that the court needs them to make. The American public could expect 2 justices to be appointed during each presidential term. There wouldn't be as much randomness to it. Trump served as president for a total of 4 years and currently has 3 justices serving on the court, whereas Obama served 8 years and only has 2 justices serving on the court. A common protest to term limits for Supreme Court justices is that the court is not supposed to be political, so with their job being guaranteed, they will be able to enforce the Constitution itself and not just popular opinion. However, this has proven to not end up playing out in the ideal way, because we live in a political world and we have a democracy for the people. If justices have the ability to engage in politics in general, they most likely have an opinion, especially because it was a president, a political figure, who gave them their job. 18-year term limits are supported by both sides of the political spectrum, and it's clear that it would only strengthen our democracy. It would reduce polarization in the court, lead to more experienced justices, and guarantee 2 appointments for each president. Vote in the next election to support lawmakers who support new policy regarding our justices in the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter whose side you're on. It's time for a basic change in how our judicial system runs to make our democracy not only more functional but also more free. It might seem hard to have faith in our government right now, but the only way we can make a change is if we vote to have our voices heard. Don't lose all hope yet. you can make a difference. It starts from the ground.